Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. We have a number of authorities here in our premises, and also we have participants who had joined us at nick.br YouTube channel. Welcome to the Verifiable Credentials Workshop and Congress. This is an event organized by cweb.br, which is the technology center for nick.br in partnership with the World Bank and the Ministry of Innovation and Public Services, with the goal to promote a debate and a discussion about digital certification and verification in Brazil. We will have a number of public entities, national and international experts, representatives from the private and civil sector to discuss about the role of verifiable credentials in a safe, interoperable system where we are going to address concepts, challenges, and opportunities to implement that in Brazil, including features related to international standards, governance, regulatory aspects, users' experience, and digital inclusion. We also like to thank DataPrev, who had allowed this premises to the organization of this workshop. Let me remind you that participants will get a participation certificate, and those who are online and use the QR code that we are going to show on the screen will also be entitled to the participation certificate. Once again, thank you so much for your time and participation, and I wish you all an excellent event. And to officially open this event, we'd like to invite Mr. Wagner Diniz, who is the director of CWeb and nick.br. He is an expert with researches and its impact in public sector. He is an electronic engineering and master of public policies with a specialization by the University of Geneva by FGV University of São Paulo. Thank you and good morning, everyone. My role here will be very brief. I just would like to thank from the bottom of my heart everyone before we officially open this event. First of all, I'd like to thank our partners. Without them, this event wouldn't be able to come through. I would like to thank the World Bank and also the Ministry of Administration and Innovation for Public Services. All of you were very kind and had a key role to make this event to be carried out. So I deeply thank you. I also would like to thank all the logistic team, nick.br, represented by Isabel, and there are many other people who are working behind the scenes to guarantee that this event will be a success, as well as the communication team from nick.br, which is responsible for the broadcasting of this workshop. I also like to thank all our dear speakers who are here on site and those who will join us remotely. All of you had traveled a long way to be with us instead of being watching the World Cup from your countries. I hope you don't get disappointed with the Brazilian team performance next week. This next Friday. And I also would like to thank all participants on site and remotely. For those who are here at the premises, I would like to thank DataPrev for its kindness to offer this amazing auditorial. Thank you so much. And please tell Rodrigo Sansan that we are very pleased with this. I also like to mention four names to whom I would like to express my deeply concern and kindness for putting together this event. So thank you so much for all the effort carried out by Bia Roche and Enrique Xavier from nick.br. Thank you so much for your wonderful work, and also Minister Farias from the Ministry of Innovation and Public Administration, who was so kind. And last but and least but not less important, Mr. Claudio Machado from the World Bank. To the four of you, I'm deeply thank you, and you were very kind. And without your help, this workshop wouldn't be able to be organized. Once again, thank you so much to all of you and all the entities and organizations which I have just mentioned. Enjoy the day. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Diniz. And now we are going to officially start our session. And for this opening session, I would like to invite Esther Dweck, which is representing MGI. Minister Esther Dweck is associated professor of the University of Rio de Janeiro, and also she's from the same entity. She has acted in the Civil Public Republic, and she got from the Economy Council the award of the Economist Women of the Year. And for that, we'd like to invite Mr. Harmut Glaser, who is the director of NIC.br. He's a physicist and a master by the Polytechnic University of São Paulo. He was in charge of modernization at the University of São Paulo at FAPESP. He has coordinated the workshop Network SP, and he's been executive secretary of CGI.br, and his name is at the Internet Hall of Fame at Internet Society, thanks to the important role that he has developed to work for the development of internet, not just in Brazil, but globally as well. And remotely, we are going to have Mrs. Yolanda Martinez. She is a digital transformation expert with more than 20 years of experience in the Caribbean and Latin America, leading a multidisciplinary team that collaborates with governments to advance their digital transformation agendas in the public sector. And she is in charge of Mexico's National Digital Strategy, directed the Federal Digital Government Unit, and also in charge of digital government, not just at the UN, but also representing a number of other countries. Thank you for your presence. Next, we give the floor to Mrs. Yolanda Martinez.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to sharing this opening panel with Harm, which I appreciate and admire a lot. I had the honor of sharing with him the organization of IGF of 2016 in Guadalajara. So I'm enthusiastic a lot about sharing the organization of this workshop with this institution, which is a pioneer in the region as NIT.BR. So thank you, Harmut, and all the Nick team for being a team with us and for allowing us to create this space of sharing in matter of verifiable credentials. So we do it with a lot of enthusiasm and with a firm commitment that all participants are gonna take best practices and the importance of global standards and to build platforms helping the people to exchange those credentials in a safe way and in a fast way. So, Minister Esther, good morning. I'm very happy of listening to you and to sharing with you this panel. The World Bank has had a long journey of work with the ministers with the ministry. So we thank a lot your trust in order to build these spaces like this. World Bank has been working in a new strategy, digital strategy, in a corp level. Recently, it was approved by the Council of the World Bank, and in the Council, we have in the steering committee of the member country represented by their economic ministry. This is a way of marking a very holistic way of working with the countries. And we have a very important portfolio in Latin America and Caribbean, both $1 million, focused specifically on transforming in how the countries enable new spaces, not only of connectivity, but also of digitalization of tremits and scaled services. In Brazil, as our biggest customer and a big reference in matter of digital transformation for the region. The topic we're gonna be working these 2 days about verifiable credentials is indeed a topic which is very relevant in the framework of this AI era and the framework of the data exchange between countries. Not only citizens and institutions of one single country, and Brazil always has shown that disposition of experiencing about sharing knowledge. We have been the headquarters of big reflection spaces and the general meeting of 2025, if I am not wrong, or 24, Brasilia received us. And there we presented a proposal to the countries to create the consortium that could enable the mutual recognition of digital identities. Those recognitions of digital identities is called regional digital citizen. It is a consortium launched in Brazil and approved there thanks to the effort between Brazil and Uruguay in the framework of the Mercosur in order to use those identity digital certificates to access to tramits and services in Uruguay, more than 300. That consortium today is funded by the World Bank and the IBC and co-developed, and it's articulated through this network. We have more than 12 countries in the integration countries in this digital identity framework built in a sovereign way according to technical specifications that the countries agreed. And it is an example that when a region works together, how international organisms are going to support those visions and those pathways marked by the countries in the scope and the scale, the digital transformation, how it's getting those mechanisms to enable, in this case, the identification of people. So with verifiable credentials, the opportunity space it's very similar. I'm very proud as Mexican of having a handling license in Mexico, one of the 32 countries and 32 states in the country, and we can drive all around the country, but not necessarily all countries accept my verifiable credential of my license. Even we're following an international standard. This is related with the adoption procedures, the appropriation, and the recognition of those verifiables credentials. We've done a lot of advance. We're 25 million people. It's a very big goal having this VC following these standards, but the challenge is to promote the adoption at the worldwide level. We need different representative countries and local governments of Brazil and different institutions of the federal government to participate in this workshop. And this is sending a signal very important to the commitment ecosystem because it's going to show us how are we going to share standards, trends, implementation strategies because we know they are present. Colleagues from CBPI, so thank you very much because you've done a very big effort through different booth camps of enabling and skill building trainings to accelerate the transition of those digital services to VCs. So these 2 days are going to be very big learning wise. And we are very happy of receiving Honduras, one of our customers with a very beautiful identity project. a very digital candidate for our VC. Dominican Republic, a big pioneer in our transformation matter, and it's preceding their meeting this year. So they are going to be sharing this year their advances in digital transformation matter and learning a lot. And I'm a big fan of public infrastructure of Brazil digitally. I know the platform creation of VCs, and I hope in a lot of countries people in presence to nowhere. From the World Bank, we're committed, and we have two big subject matters experts. We have Julian also. They are from the digital practice. 100% of their time assigned to Brazil due to the big size of the opportunity represented. And Claudia from the global team, but she knows a lot the ecosystem of the region. So please get in touch with them from the World Bank. We're enthusiastic about the knowledge platform, articulation platform of big learning spaces like this workshop, and of course the platform supporting financially any effort helping to close those gaps of connectivity and to escalate those digitalization efforts of public utilities and to develop digital skills in the governments and society, helping to capitalize a lot the benefits of the transformation, digital transformation. So thank you for helping us for being here in Brazil from the transformation and having this joint space of work. So hope you're gonna have a very good journey today.
Thank you, Yolanda Martito. Now we're going to listen to Hartmut Glaser, Executive Secretary of CGR. Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you have heard of CGI.br, but we have celebrated 30 years of activities in Brazil. It's not an It is a multi-sectorial project that was from the heart of the Brazilian government in 1995 when Standard 4 was approved that separates internet from telecommunications. And then we did this managing committee that received the attribution of taking care of the governance of the internet in Brazil. In the beginning, we were a very small group, 4 or 5 people, hidden in a corner of the FAPESP, the research fostering agency in São Paulo, and we were able to grow. Now we have Nick.br as our executive arm. If we were 4 or 5 people, today we're over 300 people working for the good of the internet in Brazil. As my colleague from Mexico mentioned, we work together in several international events. Both Mexico and Brazil have organized the International Forum. We actively participated in ICANN Internet Corporation for a sign number of names. And we tried to be very present in our government and also on the international forum. I thank you for the greetings of our colleague in Mexico on behalf, and also I'd like to greet the minister and everyone present here. I hope this workshop is really an event that is striking for Brazil. The managing committee, it's a multi-sectorial committee. It's made up by 21 counselors. They are down into the various sectors of Brazilian society. 9 from the government and 12 are not government or civil servants. They are broken down into 3 groups. 4 are from academia, 4 are business people, and 4 are from the third sector. This multi-sectorialism is our greatest feature. As we are not civil servants, we cannot approve anything, but we can propose. And we work in sync with the ministries and all the other government agencies at all levels, federal, state, and municipal or local, within the activities that are most important that we carry out. In addition to the strategic guidelines related to the use and development of the internet in Brazil, we take care of the .br. It's our internet flag. It's the brand, the feature of the names and domains of Brazilians. The internet does not only work with .br, and in Brazil, 80%, a bit over 80% of corporations, individuals use the .br as their surname. When I say surname, well, before BR, you have the name of the organization or the tax ID, both corporate and individual. So the registration of names is our responsibility, our main responsibility, and our source of funds. 40 reais a year are paid to keep the registration in operation, and this is the funding we use to develop and support Brazilian internet. In addition, CGI has the attribution of studying, promoting technical standards for the security of the internet. We're very close to GSI working in security, and we have all the security activities of the Brazilian internet where we are very active. Why are we present at this event? Because we recommend procedure standards and procedures that are technical for the internet operations in Brazil and checking data, taking part of the development of techniques so that data can actually be reliable is one of the tasks we carry out. And our partnership, especially with the two other organizers here, both the Ministry of Management Innovation and the World Bank, have very strong partnerships. We also have research programs and also development related to the internet in a very special way. We are the statistics institute of the internet. We have statistics as to how our internet in Brazil is developing and growing increasingly more and encouraging the dissemination of such numbers over the national territory. To characterize in a special way our presence in 2014 with the Dilma administration, we submitted the legal framework of the internet. We have the approval on the various levels or branches of the federal government, and we had an event in Sao Paulo in 2014, April 2014. We had the approval and acceptance of the legal framework of the internet. For those that follow the news, realize that there are certain topics that are being reviewed, and the Supreme Court is actually changing its contents. I'd like to highlight certain principles that are very important for Brazil that are used as a reference uh, parameters for other countries. The need to have a standard procedure has led us to negotiate with the federal government, but also with the legal department or industry standards and principles that rule the Brazilian internet. A very important principle that is the first on our list of 10 is freedom and privacy and human rights. The second one is that governance must be democratic and collaborative. The third principle is universality of the internet. Fourth principle is diversity of the internet. The fifth is innovation that comes through the internet, and we are day impacted with new applications and developments. The sixth principle that is very important, that many times is not well understood, is the neutrality of the net. The net is not guilty for anything but the two ends, those that send and those that receive. sh- give the nature of the internet. The net itself is neutral. The fact that the network cannot have its effects, the illicits that are transmitted should impact those that are at the end of the line, those that are using the internet, not the means or the medium, those that are transmitting the signal, but actually those that are speaking and receiving that should be judged on the correct use, fake news, so on and so forth. The other very important principle is functionality, security, and stability of the internet. Today, we have a great concern in actually making the internet firmer, more secure. A lot of information is shared over the internet, and we must be careful and have intense collaboration with several agencies of the federal government. Another principle that is very important is standardization and interoperability of the internet. The legal and regulatory environment provided by the internet, and already mentioned, NIC.br is the executive branch. CGI is the committee. We don't have a legal entity. We don't have a corporate tax entity, but NIC.br is its executive branch. NIC.br actually assesses the implementation or takes care of the implementation of all our projects, interactions, and with our partners. And the team of checking ages is a very important task. We have a group working intensely, very close to several government agencies in a very special way with the MGI, the Ministry of Management and Innovation, so that we can have international criteria that are acceptable also in Brazil. This workshop that carried out by the Center of Studies of Web Technologies is our executive branch within NIC.br that takes care of applications, accessibility of the internet, and this the web project in partnership with MGI and the World Bank will have the participation of many international experts. And I'd like to welcome all of you and so that we can together learn from Europe, from India, the World Bank, from other partners on verifiable credentials. It's no use inventing if they don't work. Hence, the international standards are very important protocols in their implementation. And the role of the infrastructure that is public and digital, and also digital wallets, in addition to the regulation aspects and governance, are very important in digital inclusion. Today's event is yet another evidence that we can work together, Brazilian society, the four sectors seeking the well being of Brazil, and with partners like the World Bank and MGI, the ministries, we want the 2 days of this week to be yet another rich experience for our country. And I hope the event is very successful and CGI is available to all of you. Once again, congratulations. Thank you very much, Mr. Hartmut Glauser. We'd like to invite Minister Esther Dweck, Minister of Management and Innovation in Public Services. Good morning, everyone. It is a great joy to be here at this seminar or workshop. It's a topic we've been discussing for some time within the government on verifiable credentials to share the stage with Yolanda from the World Bank. I'd like to thank her, Claudio from the World Bank, that helped us organize this event. I'd like to thank Harmut from CGI, Nick.br, and Wagner for this very important support and the partnership to hold this event. Kiki from DataPrev for the auditorium. And here I think we have obviously all our MGI team that has organized Miriam, Luana, Guy, and also the presence of other authorities as the president, Wilson Kamolezi of IPI. The idea of this event was precisely for us to move forward in a topic that has grown greatly within the government. To me, it's a great satisfaction to open this event dedicated to building the public reliable infrastructure that is very in line with the agenda we've had within the ministry, but not only within the ministry, within the whole Brazilian government of digital transformation that is sovereign and inclusive. We were talking a while ago about accessibility, precisely having this idea of inclusion sovereign, because it is a topic that from the beginning in 2023, we addressed this topic even before the world having realized the importance of sovereignty in a digital debate. And I heard Yolanda mentioning this topic as well, and of course, after an advance of geopolitical conflicts, if you have some autonomy to expand the ability of managing technologies within your own country, is a strategic fact, because the focus of the Brazilian agenda on the side of Brazilian people is to have an outreach to all Brazilians, male and female, so that, and we have actually moved forward towards a rationale of a government that is increasingly proactive. The state transformation process that the ministry has, as requested by President Lula, we have been leading that. We try to make lives people easier, ensure rights, access to public policies, and the digital world, the digital government has a key role in that. In our view, we called it a government for every person. It's not individualistic. Much on the contrary, it's the rationale that you can actually provide increasingly personalized services and knowing throughout the life of people what people need, depending on their conditions, what they need at their very specific timings. We say that if we think about the standpoint of digital government, we came from a development of an electronic government where the internet, the online services became something more present in the lives of the government, started using electronic sites, the civil landmark or the legal framework. It was within an electronic government. We migrate to a digital one, and services are offered digitally. And the pandemic is actually sped this process up in Brazil, in particular. We are at the third stage, and in this audience of extremely specialized people, I don't need to explain the term. It's the agent government. I don't need to explain the term. It has to anticipate the demands of the population, not only wait for the population to demand what they need, but offer directly what people need. And obviously, for this, the government must be intelligent, must be focused on people, must be able to identify opportunities, anticipate needs, and inform everyone on their rights and benefits through public policies. And actually, there are some that people are unaware they are entitled to. And we've been working on certain pillars to attain that, and this agent government increasingly stronger, identifying first people who each one is. We have the login on the .gov.br. It's being restructured. When we arrived, we took power, we actually cleaned the database, having people with a single tax ID. We got to 170 million of single CPFs, or tax IDs, and the national identity card. It's both physical and digital, integrated to the gov.br, allowing people to be aware of everything. I'm going to ask for some water, please. Obviously, another part, in addition for you to have an identification, is having all the records. With all the records, it's an important act that was passed in 2023. Thank you. And this is the work with all records in Brazil, having being an identifier of people. The other one are public infrastructures, especially digital public infrastructures. We've been well We have great concern regarding data. We treat it as a public digital infrastructure. We've been developing platforms and capabilities that serve the society as a whole, responding to certain priorities of the President Lula administration, or having some public services. The identity card and CPF have been strengthening civil identification peaks that came into this debate of Brazilian sovereignty. It's a great digital public infrastructure, the single record. We've been working on Brazilian databases for you to have the data that we call data conversing amongst themselves. So, interoperability, data integration with respect of security, privacy, and actually integration of the data allows more productivity. And it's key for debating verifiable credentials, obviously, and all the pillar of sovereignty, from the sovereignty that is initial of actually repatriating the data with the that are highly critical and strategic, having a public infrastructure, as is the case of our two IT companies, Serpro and DataPrev, in addition to the physical space where data are, we have to move to other layers, especially in the operation of the data. And we want to move forward even more in developing technologies locally so that we can be more independent in this production chain of the digital world. And obviously, when we talk about inclusion of people, we talk about federative inclusion. Brazil is a gigantic country with great diversity of capabilities between municipalities, states, and the federal government. And since the beginning of 2023, the president launched a digital strategy to align and enable technical support. Today, we have over 2,800 municipalities in the network of gov.br. They use the infrastructure and they also have technical support. 2,800 municipalities. So the inclusion in this test for the federative sphere is very important to have digital inclusion. We have two central pillars of significant connectivity. The government has moved forward a lot in these areas, in more remote areas, also in all public premises in public schools. Well, we actually had some evaluation of that, and digital literacy, which is key so that the population is not outside this digital transformation process we've been going through. As we get to this topic of this seminar of verifiable credentials, our view is strategic. It enables rights, attributes, conditions, and authorizations that are recognized by competent sources. I told Miriam that the way of explaining that to a layperson, in addition to the signature of gov.br, we have over 1,000 signatures a day. We get to 1,300,000 signatures a day. So people had to do that in a notary public office. People can do that on the gov.br platform. The verifiable credential goes beyond that, but it's actually the authentication of documents, the traditional authentication of documents. It is not necessarily you're submitting the whole document with security, a single piece of information, increasing the level of privacy and respect to the general law of data protection. And we've been working on this infrastructure of verifiable credentials. We have a great partnership with India in this initiative, and Guy is our representative, Guilherme Almeida. We have some colleagues from India that will take part of this workshop, and it was from a mission that we had in India that this topic came to the government. Brazil already has verifiable credentials, etc. But within our government, we have brought this topic very much from what we saw in India that ended up becoming a very important partnership.
With that, once we consider that we are going to improve our citizens' life, where they will no longer depend just on invisible consultations throughout the systems. They now become active participants in the verification of the credentials in case that they need to allow some sort of authorizations. And it's still up to the state to guarantee citizens' rights. But with that, all our users will have a warranty of what they would like to show. And I will share two concrete examples which really illustrates what I'm talking about. First, which are verifiable credentials for the rural credit sphere from a public structure, which is the Rural Environmental Registry, and also the data where we register all our producers, and we wanted to improve rural participants where they will have a digital participation throughout the verifiable credentials. And we already have a pilot project on the way that will help us to have that become a reality. I would love to release that in our next SAFRA plan for the whole country, but I don't know if that will be ready to go as we are already in June. But for the coming year, I hope that will be available and open to any rural producers, individuals, and corporations. And the second step is the agent verification. Agent assurance and verification is a global demand where we want to protect. And recently, we had a very important update in the legal framework by the Supreme Court, where the government has regulated this recent interpretation by the Supreme Court, where we will allow a higher protection to children and adolescents, thanks to the digital statute for children and adolescents, and also women advocacy, but mainly children, adolescents, and aging verification is key. And throughout that assurance and by verifiable credentials, we may do that without uh, without necessary allowing or disclosing all your identity or private information. And verifiable credentials will allow us to do that with within the scope of institutional warranty, and not disclosing all your private data such as birth date and name and identity numbers, you name it. And this workshop is key, as we have representatives from the civil society, the World Bank, and representatives from the government, as well as a public representative such as DataPrev. The World Bank is a key partner of us throughout the global digital verification, where we may discuss how this sort of framework will not be captured and just withhold of one single country. Once we'll be able to have additional verifiable credentials and with the joint acknowledgement without any sort of aspects that will prevent that credential to be approved anywhere, as it is the case with the boarding tickets, which we can simply use that credential wherever you are in the globe. These are some examples which go towards the digital verification, and that is centralized within something which is key to the digital environment. So that's why the whole protection within the digital environment to guarantee reliability that we may set not just among our citizens, but also between the states and the population as a whole. And we see that as an economic opportunity to reduce the verification costs, to improve the verifications, and it will expand allowance to services, credits, and markets. We have been building up digital public frameworks emphasizing innovation, where the industry and sector of services and innovations will also benefit from those digitals and credentials. And the state is the one to be able to build up reliable frameworks to allow the ecosystem to grow with inclusion and sovereignty. I would like also to highlight a very simple message to all participants that we have here today. Public reliability should be ready to circulate into a digital environment with governance and authority. By doing that, verifiable credentials will strengthen the state and open new pathways for a digital economy, which will be more inclusive and safe. I wish you all an excellent workshop and thank you so much.
Antes você tem que ir embora? Você avisa quando você quiser. Oi, Dani.
Thank you so much to Minister Esther Dweck. With that, we'd like to thank the participants in this opening panel for their contributions, which have brought different perspectives to the discussions that will guide this workshop. We kindly invite the speakers to remain on the stage for the official photo of this session. Ladies and gentlemen, next we are going to start our panel one, which will address basic introduction to the landscape of our workshop. And the goal is to level up verifiable credentials. This panel will introduce the main concepts and an overview of the topics which will be discussed throughout this workshop, where we are going to highlight challenges and opportunities to the implementation of ecosystems of verifiable credentials, not just in Brazil, but in the international scope. And for that, Mr. Henrique Xavier from cweb.br and nick.br, and he's an expert in projects for web nick.br, and he's got expertise in web science, artificial intelligence. Now, Mr. Xavier, you have the floor. Can you all hear me all right? We have a number of experts here in our audience, and for those who are not familiarized with the concept of verifiable credentials, I will make a brief introduction about this topic. Before addressing verifiable credentials, let's define what a credential is. That is a document issued by institutions or individuals with information about some sort of entity, and the issuer should be declared. There are no credentials without an issuer, and that will be key for the optimization of those credentials. A passport, for instance, this is an example of a credential with some important features. First of all, you relate that document to some sort of entity. Here, the picture make such a relationship to a subject, and such a relation shouldn't be done by a photo or a name. It is possible to do that indirectly without revealing the identity of the person. Next, we have a number of information about that entity, the issuer identification to know who is testing or verifying the information, and we have authenticity proofs. On a paper document, we are going to have the coin paper, we are going to have stamps, holograms, stamps, signatures, and you also have information integrity proof. After the issue of the credential, there was no tampering. At the passport, you have a plastic with a hologram which is stamped above the paper to prevent anyone to do something with that printing on the paper. That is a way to allow warranty. Computer is not able to do that. So someone has to do it to guarantee integrity of that paper document. There are some theme parks such as Kidzania where they issue passports to their visitors. And let me highlight, this is not a false credential. It has authenticity, but that has been issued by an issuer that for identification use or people identification user that will not be accepted. And this is a very interesting element because it includes a social component and not just technological. It is required that the issuer will be acknowledged for its guarantee. Credentials, they don't have to be issued by governmental entities. It can be issued by, for instance, this diploma of graduation, which is a credential, and you say that a certain person has a diploma and that has to be verified by a university. And credentials, they may be not just to people but also to companies, institutions. For instance, on the left of the slides, you see a work permission or of a place that can be a commercial, a business, you name it. And to the right, you have a documentation of a vehicle with the name of the owner and some characteristics of the car. And credentials, they may include intangible entities and not just physical. Here we have a certificate of a computer program, a registry with information which will identify that program, such as the hash of the program, the authors, the language that was produced and developed. These are the attributes to a credential. Anytime we talk about verifiable credentials, what do I mean by verifiable? That is checked by a machine where information reading and the verification of the integrity of the information to guarantee that has not been tapered and guarantees the issuer, that is done automatically by computers. Therefore, you don't need a human person to see if a passport has been tampered or not. For a credential to be active and useful, you have to guarantee some technological features thanks to a standard format and fields to check that information if that is being organized, and that will allow the information extraction. And in the integrity proof has to be authenticated, and cryptography is a tool which will not just guarantee the authenticity of the issuer but also and that entity was entitled of that without any tampering with. However, that does not guarantee that that information is real, and for that there is another social component. Those people who will be the issuer, they have to be reliable for the type of information that they will allocate. It's useless if the information is authentic and full if the person who has attested did not include the real information. And last but not least, we have another social component. These are the main characteristics for technical standards, but we also need the patterns for exchange of the credentials. But the credential itself would rely on these aspects. However, we still rely on social components. We need institutional legitimacy of the issuers. In addition to the technology, those credentials will rely on that social framework, which will allow authorities to become issuers or to really rely on that information and certify that that information is real. In addition, people and countries, they have to adopt the technology and accept it, which represents a social challenge.
Verifiable credentials have another thing that enable them to happen, respect to privacy, is a very interesting element of verifiable credentials because they have selection of information. So be over 18 without showing your date of birth or identity. Here, it is also important to emphasize that enable the selective unveiling, but they do not ensure them. But what may happen is that, for example, a website says it needs to verify a person being over 18 and check information like tag ID, CPF, identity, etc. This element is not blocked by technology. You must have legal elements that actually stop this kind of abuse. And you need to have exchange standards that in different transaction ways of those credentials so that this system occurs. And we adopt open standards that are shared by institutions, international institutions, and adopted globally. You have a structure that enables implementation by various organizations. So issuance and storage, submission or presentation may be carried out by different types of software, different companies, institutions in plug and play style. You can create an ecosystem of multiple services and types of software that may operate. And here I've described verifiable credentials. Well, giving some materiality, very simplified model, but it's not a real one. Just to give you an idea what it will look like. The verifiable credential has specific fields for with information. You have the identification of the issuer of this credential, and at the end you have this cryptographic proof. This is an example for people to have in their minds what a verifiable credential means actually later to see what how this proof is actually structured. This is just a didactic example. Another important thing to be said is that you don't need to have an image connected. The most important part here is the text doc with the information. There's no need for an image to be connected to it, although there may be. This cryptographic proof will tell whether the information is true and actually being emitted by the issuer. I'm going to explain how those proofs happen. There are several ways of doing that. The most common one is through a digital signature. I'm going to explain how it works in a simplified way. The digital signature is based on asymmetric cryptography. Well, it's a technique of you shuffling a document in a way that is not legible, and you're being able to recover, retrieve that. People that can have access to that be able to retrieve the information. Asymmetric cryptography, the process of encrypting and turning that into a secret code is a slightly different process from the process that makes the uh, opening or breaking of the information that is asymmetric. The process starts by generating. You have a mathematical procedure that takes a random number and returns two large numbers to you. They are like passwords that are going to codify and decodify your message. So here I have an example. I take a given message. There's a procedure, a mathematical algorithm, and it has a parameter, the cryptographic key. And I actually share this number with a procedure, and this number will transform this message into something that is unintelligible. The point is that those two numbers generated previously, they are related. They cannot be any numbers whatsoever. The two numbers are related between each other. To decodify the message, I must take the other number generated, go through the same process. Some cryptography processes may be slightly, some are basically the same process. You change the number and you share the message that has been encrypted with the previous number. And you go through this process with this number and you retrieve the information. The important thing is that only this number can actually decodify this. Any other number that you add, you won't have the decodifying. You will generate anything to you. How do you use that for a digital signature? The idea is that you're going to take these two numbers, and one you're going to call private key. You're going to store in a very safe way. Only you know about it. And the other one will be publicized. You will present to people, you want people to know this number because it will be this public key that will actually confirm that that signature is actually yours. So how do you do that? You take that message, you encrypt it, use the private key, and you attach it to the message. You're going to send a message with no cryptography, and along with it, you're going to send this encrypted message. Here we have certain simplifications. There are intermediary processes formed, but this is the essence process. Well, you submit this message or you submit this message to somebody when you want to confirm that this has been written to you and that is reliable. It will take this signature, this encrypted attachment. You will use the public key to de-encrypt it. If it is recovers it, and it will compare what's obtained with the message that came along with the signature. If the message is the same, the message is reliable and it's being issued by the issuer that is the owner of this pair of public-private keys. If it is different, either it has been tampered, the message has been tampered, or it has not been issued by the entity that claimed to have issued it. This is the key to a digital signature. We've described how the verifiable credentials work in a simplified way and who does what with verifiable credentials. How do they operate? You're going to have some relevant roles here. I highlight four relevant roles: the issuer that will issue the credential, that test that it is real information. You have the holder, those that control it, responsible for the credential. It can be the object of the credential as a person or perhaps the owner of a vehicle or something like that. And they will store it in a software or a piece of software or service that is called credential repository. And a verifier is any institution that wants to check information contained in a credential. You want to check a credential, for example. As an example, in the case of age verification, the issuers are issuers like Secretariats of Security of State. It could be gov.br. They can issue a credential of being over 18. And the repository of credentials, they are software pieces. There may be several companies that may create the digital wallets. We have some examples here that will be present here during our workshop. We have others as well, and the very gov.br that we're going to see in later sessions. The holder would be people themselves, and the verifier would be applications and websites that need to verify the age according to the digital area. Well, first we have the process where we request a credential. It's sent to the holder that stores the credential in this software piece. It has layers of protection so that the credential, well, we hope they have it, this kind of protection, so that it can be actually protected and safe. When a verifier wants to access a credential, they make a request. The digital wallet asks the holder, the person on your phone, well, such website wants to access given piece of information. do you authorize it? The holder authorizes, and then the digital wallet presents the information to the verifier. This is the basic operation or function. Later have talks that will go into more details. I would make a description of the workshop, but in interest of time, I'm going to skip this part. But I'd like to say that the purpose of the workshop is to deepen this topic, covering technical aspects. We're going to have more technical aspects and social aspects. As we've seen, the social part is extremely important for the function of verifiable credentials. We're going to have presentations that are going to be more theoretical, but also concrete examples of existing applications in Brazil and abroad. I'm going to move on. We're going to have several talks, and let's see if you have any questions. We may actually move on to questions, and we have 5 minutes in interest of time. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Gustavo. I'd like to ask about security and the assurance. What is the fundamental network of this portfolio? Will it be created by a blockchain to enable or make transparency easier? What is the main network? That's my question. Thank you. Blockchain is a possibility. Here I'm talking in very generic ways, not specifically of the application in Brazil or age verification. We have several possible ways of your storing verifiable credentials and log them. Blockchain is a possibility, but you don't need to use blockchain. You may do it in different ways. Well, you may have the storage performed or done in different ways, and also the registration. Okay. I think, well, if we don't have online questions, we may wrap up, move on to the next. Actually, we have a break now. Very good. Thank you once again. Thank you, Mr. Enrique Xavier, for your presentation. Let us have an official photo time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to make a short break and we'll be Ladies and gentlemen, now let's resume the program with the panel on digital public infrastructure of verifiable credentials. To moderate this panel, we invite Luciano Charlito de Freitas. He is a senior specialist in digital and artificial intelligence at the World Bank with over 25 years of experience in digital development, public policy, and infrastructure. He leads and supports digital transformation and innovation projects in the public sector in Brazil and Latin America. To compose this round panel, we also invite Beatriz Vasconcelos. She's Deputy Secretary of the Secretariat for Articulation and Monitoring of the Civil Halls of the Presidency of the Republic, and Luana Santana Roncarati, Assistant Secretary for Digital Government at the Ministry of Management and Innovation in Public Services. A member of the Career of X Specialist in Public Policy and Government Management since 2006, she holds a PhD degree in Political Science from the University of Brasilia and was recognized in 2020 with the Public Spirit Award for her contribution to the advancement of Brazilian digital government. Luciano, we turn over to you to moderate this panel. Good morning. It is our first panel, so I would like to thank the organizing committee to participate in this meeting. I would also like to greet the audience on behalf of the Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Colombia groups. They made such an effort to be here with us today, and they've just arrived this morning. This first panel will talk about digital public infrastructure and how that relates to verifiable credentials. I have the honor of sharing this panel with Luana and Beatriz. They are really a reference in this area, also colleagues in the public sector, and they are changing the verifiable credentials landscape in Brazil. And they are also leaders in DPI. So verifiable credentials are the basis for public infrastructures and will provide some safety in the use of those services and this infrastructure. It also allows global integration in the use of verifiable credentials, not just in Brazil, but also in other countries. In this panel, we are going to have two guiding questions, one to Luana, one to Beatriz. Each one of them will have 15 minutes for their presentations and then a quick round of closing remarks. So, Bia, here's the question we prepared for you. What are public digital infrastructures and how verifiable credentials relate into this context? And also, what is the potential of credentials in the world today? So you have the floor. Good morning. I'd rather stand. I think it is easier for me to check my slides. First, I would like to thank you for this invitation. This is a meeting that was so well organized. I would like to congratulate the organizing committee. And we have the best experts here represented both from the Brazilian government and also from institutions of the third sector and the private sector as well. I will quickly connect the digital public infrastructures and credentials. And here's my title. I say it's a problem of trust. This is the problem we have in economy. A friend of mine just realized they had a bank account opened under their name. Of course, that person was not familiar with him, probably because somebody used a fake ID to open a bank account under his name, and he just found out because he connected to the central bank website and discovered about this. We also have problems in certificates and graduation certificates. We hear a lot about people who have um, really counterfeit graduation or post graduation certificates. And also public benefits. This is another important topic because there's many initiatives in place trying to fight these fake IDs. We have made a lot of strides in terms of digital identities, but still we face a lot of problems of fraud in receiving those benefits. This is a problem that is not only singular to digital times. This is a problem we've always had. So, in case of Brazil, we have notary offices, we also have the trust seals, and within the governmental structures, the vertical infrastructure of responsibilities and of our ministries, the fact even physically we have similar buildings, they're so similar in shape as well. So that helps accountability as part of our structure. This is why we have a vertical system of accountability. Accountability not just for the decisions that are made, but also for documents. And in the digital world, we reproduce the same framework. We created those silos, those trust based systems that are isolated within each one of the institutions. So each ministry has their own database. The same is true for universities, hospitals, any type of institution in society today. Of course, this has a very high cost, not just in the case of fraud, but also the cost of duplication, disconnection, problems related to trust. In Nigeria, for example, they realize that they have 8 ID systems that overlap and have spent over $4 billion in some years. And also the data from the US, because we tend to believe that richer countries do things better. But in the case of COVID, they conducted a study to determine how much of the emergency relief payments were made to the right people. And they realized that from a third to a fourth of people who receive the emergency relief payment were the ones who should receive it. And the problem related to the correct identification of people, in addition to cases of fraud. There's also an estimate that states that we will need um, the budget of almost 7 ODCs to maintain all these systems in the world. So that's the rationale behind those public infrastructures. So what's new about DPI is that we emphasize trust. We used to talk a lot about facilitation, breaking down silos, and improving the identification of people. But there's also this trust point. So I like that infrastructure is a shared mean. Share means to several ends. So you create layers that can serve different purposes. So they create value not because of what they are, but based on what is produced and then shared on top of those layers. You've probably heard about 3 types of digital infrastructures: payment, ID, and authentications, and also data exchange. But there's another point. In DPI, identity relates to who I am and how I can reliably know that. So in a digital ID case, we have systems that can help us check if that person is really himself or herself. And also there's a question about how can we transfer money. So payment systems like Pix in Brazil have solved that. In the past, each bank needed to have a parallel system, a parallel protocol with other banks, several parallel systems. And Pix builds a parallel road that is valid for all banks. This has a major effect, not just on transactions, but also in terms of bank innovation. But we haven't been able to answer the question, which was, what are my assets and my features in a reliable way in a digital arena? So, what are my assets? What are my certifications, my diplomas, my attributes? And this is where verifiable credentials fit into the scenario. I've translated a document from CSVI that I love very much. They say that the current data sharing system works in an NAN connection type. So if I'm in Brazil, when I go to a medical appointment, I generate a document, an exam result, for example, that's mine. If I move to a different physician or a different hospital, I need to take the exam results to this other document or to another hospital, or even repeat that exam, because some hospitals do not share information. And there are also public documents that I need to take to issue new documents. If I open a bank account, I also need to take my documents. And oftentimes, fraud can have a place there. So there are endpoints to other endpoints. This is why there's thousands of active documents and assets that I need to prove I have every time I'm going to issue an identity with another player, and every time I interact with another player. And that's true not just within the country, but also globally. That has a huge cost. With verifiable credentials, you can safely exchange data at an individual level. So I can receive a document, which is a trustworthy credential, and that includes all the examples I've just given, and I could be the reliable bridge to transfer this information to other institutions or systems. And I think that this is a great insight. We talk a lot about interoperability and how difficult it is. Luana is probably going to talk about Connecta or the X Road. But this does not transfer major database exchanges. But if you think about credentials as a new way of operability, then it could work. We talk a lot about Estonia, because once you give your data to the state is enough. So if you have that data, that piece of data, and for any case use, you can share that information safely. So that's what we want. And we are also going to talk about this safe issuance system, to have a safe issuer, as well as a system that has encrypted information to make sure that the system is reliable. In the digital public infrastructure context of verifiable credentials, there are at least three ways of achieving this interoperability, which is not always very clear, and it's important to clarify. There are three ways of uploading data. You can have a credential that will upload the full data. So if I have a credential from my scorecard and from my school, and I would like to share that with another school, that credential can bring all my score throughout all years I've had in that institution, studied in that institution. I can also upload data partially, such as in a design of an ID credential that, depending who I share that identity with, I can share the fields specifically that I'm going to share. Or the choice of not uploading any data at all. That in the law related to safety of children, ECA, we can have a yes or no answer. And I'm talking very, very broadly about the ECA digital statute for children and adolescents. So if that person meets a given requirement, so am I over 16? Am that person over 18? So it'll be like a yes or no choice. It's important to understand those different systems. They might be confusing. Oh, I'm going to make a credential. Am I going to share all my data? No, quite. It depends on how it is designed. And finally, there are several examples. I'm not going to dwell into each one of them. We are going to talk more about that today and tomorrow. But out of the most common examples, some relate to credit. So CAR, for example, based on these credential, someone can go to the bank and have access to credit in a safer way. Also, employability to also with verifiable credit credentials, also social benefits. So suppose that income is of course is a very important criteria for many of these beneficials. I could have a credential that states what my income is so that I could apply for different benefits. And there is a, a different one, which I call an energy credential. Those who have solar panels at home, for example, we call that person a prosumer, somebody who both produces and also consumes energy. There's a lot of energy waste because some people produce energy but cannot sell it, because to do that, there are several documents required. So, in this innovative solution, you could have verifiable credentials for various uses in different markets. So, I will save the bolder examples for later. And there are some examples in which I haven't seen a global example related to what we expect for the digital ECA law. So in European Union, there's this huge wallet with over 250 institutions in several countries. 25 countries. And the same is true for India, with almost 10 billion documents for various issues. So the wallet gets not just public documents, but also private documents. There's also an example from Argentina with verifiable driver's license, and that's a very recent example. There are many examples, but what I would like to highlight is that DPI for verifiable credentials is not a wallet, it's not an app, it's not a specific integration case. We are talking about a public, reliable layer that will help us reduce transaction costs for the economy, to improve our ability to have access to our citizens' rights, and also to have a good integration between different states. And so, to wrap up, I would like to leave some key questions that we're going to explore today and tomorrow. And those are key questions for governance. For the system to work, we need to make sure that issuers are reliable. Who will determine what those credentials are? What will be the standards to be used? Of course, they'll not be proprietary. I don't know even why I added that to the slide. There should be open standards. But which one of them? There are several discussions in international forums, and some of these standards are not mature yet. And also wallets. Should we start with a public wallet? Should we have a hybrid wallet? Should we allow private wallets to take agency in generating those documents? There's also the role of the private sector. So, how can the private sector participate in a way that will not capture a value that should be public? And that's a very strong discussion we've had, especially for the digital ECA laws. And inclusion, how can it ensure offline access to people without a smartphone? Because it's a myth to believe that this is a system that only works online. This is not true. There are several design options that allow this ecosystem to work offline as well. That's a major digital inclusion factor. So
Now I will turn over to Luana, who is going to talk specifically about Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Bia. Excellent presentation. I think it was a very good way to start our debate that we're going to have over the 2 days. I like the provocation questions at the end. I think the identification of an anchor or a trust anchor agency for verifiable credentials will be key to ensure the functioning, but also the trust of the population and consumers of this kind of technology on the credibility of this kind of encrypted key that is being discussed at this seminar. Now I'm going to turn over to Luana. Luana, how has Brazil been understood and acting in terms of digital public infrastructure and the highlights Brazil has to digital identity? What would be the view on verifiable credentials? Can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you, Luciano. Thank you, Bea. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to stand to make things easier. I'd like to thank organizers and the whole team responsible for the organization from the Ministry of Management and Innovation. Everyone involved, I'd like to thank very much CGI, Nick.br for the participation, and the World Bank who have long been our partners in helping us greatly to mature this debate we've been carrying out. I remember, Bia, it's a pleasure and honor to be here at this panel with you. And I remember our first contact, I think it was back in 2023, when this topic of digital public infrastructure started circulating and we started having some conversation and bring us this debate as quickly as possible and as possible to Brazilian reality, even though, as the minister Esther Dweck mentioned and spoke quite well, it's always a challenge to speak after her on this debate and what we have been trying to implement. I think it is a very close topic to the strategy that we've been adopting in the past few years. I'm going to talk briefly about our situation in this scene, how we've been carrying out this debate and incorporating in our strategy with a viewpoint that makes sense to Brazil. So here we're going to talk about the infrastructures. It's great that Beatrice brought the concept of infrastructure as shared medium to multiple sources and how we've been carrying out this. It brings a lot with the viewpoint of MGI, of the Secretariat of Digital Management, MGI, because it expands and provides state capabilities for the federal government and still guide states and municipalities in some cases and digital and have a main mission to promote and articulate, monitor, and enable the whole national strategy of digital government.
So let me share with you what we are doing. So Ministry has already mentioned this number. We are almost 180 million people with active accounts in gov.br. So we have advanced a lot in those accounts with more safety. So, and we are also reaching almost 120 million in the silver and gold category accounts. We are talking about 83% of our population interacting online to request digital services. We are talking about 92% of federal services that are being provided digitally, 5,000 services that are provided online, and an integration with another 8,000 state level services that are integrated in our platform. So we have accelerated the use of this app and the availability of digital public services. according to the survey of CityGovBR, our census of the internet. In the past 12 months, about 71% of Brazilians used some solution of electronic governance, and we highlight many partnerships that have been established and also multilateral organisms that participated in that and have shared this experience in digital government.
And bringing this the relationship that what we are discussing here, I think it will actually be added to the search or the survey carried out by the OECD, how we cover the trust of Brazilian population in the federal government. In 2022, we had 26% of people that trusted the government, and we have been able to take a leap of 12% points in 2025, getting to 38%, exceeding the countries in the region. And some of the measurements have made in this study, and some of them were about the implementation of social public policies as the strengthening of our family grant and the state digital transformation with the GovPR platform. I think there are some elements that bring how the government can promote this trust and how some of the known infrastructures may actually help extend the trust to other segments of the population. Here we've been working on the line of Minister Esther Dweck mentioned on our national strategy of digital inclusion that seeks more personalized, more intelligent one in the action of the state, knowing specificity, knowing that digital technologies bring opportunities today. Of course, a lot of responsibilities and challenges bring opportunities for us to better know our population and serve them in a more accurate way regarding what people actually need. I'm going to go over this very briefly. Our strategy is organized on five main pillars. I'm going to focus most on the topic of identification and the national data infrastructure, communicating with the things that we discuss here and related to verifiable credentials. Our five pillars go over identification, the service platform, federative integration, the national infrastructure of data, and a great cross-cutting access of security. And mentioning the national infrastructure of data, what do you consider data national infrastructure? We felt it was important to work on this term, national infrastructure. We've incorporated this concept for the first time in our federal strategy of digital government. We strongly view the federal government, but it also focuses on seeking greater robustness of the strategic use of data, seeking greater integration, higher integration, enabling several users analysis with great focus on data protection, and also with a view of promoting strategic use of data, enabling our federal government agencies to act strategically and seeking or perhaps tapping into the whole potential of data that we have today. So, are we just talking about physical infrastructure, hardware, software? What are we talking about? We consider that national data infrastructure is a great arrangement that includes policies, standards, technological standards, infrastructure tools, technological platforms, and also people. We're talking about capacity building, having human resources that are able to deal with this new data reality with the utmost purpose of promoting more citizenship, more effective public policies. Note that this is a great framework of multiple resources that must be coordinated and orchestrated so that we can promote strategic use of data. Data themselves. There's an image lacking. So slight error. We had a sort of graphic presentation of data. It's not enough to have data. Overall, the federal government and local governments then have a lot of data. But the idea here is for us to have the data and know what the data are, that they can be worked on to have quality, to be interoperable, so that we have the ability of using them at the time of database decision making. So that things based on artificial intelligence to have what we have, and a debate that is a bit more advanced than all those others, to actually work based on our legislation to protect data, promote privacy, security, to have important debate on technological environment, what is most appropriate to promote the use, and a more sovereign view on how we're going to promote this data usage. All of this is related to governance. Some of the possible results that are possible from this organization and promotion of the National Data Infrastructure, IND. So we have automation of benefits and building benefits, the improvement of efficiency, reducing flaws, more transparency, safer identification of people, and promoting AI solutions. All of this communicates with some of the requests of President Lula to our team that is precisely promoting and taking care of the Brazilian database, as we've been calling it most times. So we've been working with this digital public infrastructure in our national strategy of a digital government, which is a topic that will become more known and will be formally debated from the Indian presidency of the G20. And we participated, collaborated with all this debate. We realize it makes sense and it's very much in line with all strategy that is historical Brazil looking at digital public infrastructures. And this is the rationale of infrastructure as shared medium with a system logic that are shared, interoperable with open standards that serve public services and also private services on a large scale. We're not talking about specific group infrastructures or for specific purposes. We're talking about uh, large scale access by our society with legal and well defined models that actually contribute to the elimination of fragmentation and transformation into silos, enabling other programs and initiatives from them with a very important viewpoint of inclusion and promoting development. Here are some of our examples that we consider of our digital public infrastructures, from digital identity, connected, that I'm going to comment on briefly, PICs, and other guys, and single no, registration. And here were some images missing here, but this, well, let me tell you about civil identification GPI having a new ID card and gov.r as a focus to promote an improvement of identification in the country. And this is what we have been doing lately for verifiable credentials with this view of national data infrastructure and also digital public infrastructure. As Bia mentioned previously, we have a social and economic cost that is very high in Brazil of making the identification on having document proof. So having less physical documents will eliminate these systemic inefficiencies that we have in the country. So we presented several counters. Well, we share documents via email, on social media, and this is something that is quite frequent in Brazil. So we have redundancies, we have an excessive exposure of people's documents and data, and we know trust is limited. We have certain risks regarding certain copies and susceptibility of the material and low reutilization from, the public agencies and also general public services We had Enrique's talk this morning that was very good, saying that what is a verifiable credential? It's a document that is issued that will be encrypted standards and ensure more authenticity, reliability, and trust of the government. So you can prove the data on yourself without sharing access information. And the result of that and our expectation is that we have the increase in trust of those transactions. This is just an image to illustrate. Well, Enrique has shared it already with these three main players, these three roles, the holder, the issuer, and the verifier. And with this role that is important, actually, with this task of inverting this traditional logic of documents, going to digital proofs that are more selective, portable, and that can be audited. This is a work of the design minimization. As Bia mentioned, you start having the possibility of having design that you can actually have certain specific cuts of what actually is necessary with great focus on data protection, and also the possibility of having proportional auditing without centralization of personal data. Here we understand that gov.br, along with CIN or with this authentication of services, we have one of the axis of this institutional tripod that we have been trying to work on, has this link to our strategy, how we've been moving forward, and the size of our digital public infrastructure to identify how we can move forward in this line of building trust from those digital capabilities nationally that we have. I need a few more minutes, but I'm almost done. And here, the public key infrastructure, the ITI role, so the role of building trust in cryptography and all the infrastructure that we have in Brazil, and Connecta, the program that promotes interoperability between public systems or government programs, and the role of DataPrev, that is here, our host, as technological partner, that is strategic technological operator, that is public, and also tapping into the institutional strengths that we have at not only at the Ministry of Science and Innovation, and also the agencies DataPrev and several very close and attentive to this technological developments. Here we've been working on some specific pilots of being, over 18. We're going to have other panels that are specific to address that rural credit and some experiences in the occupational landscape. So here we have very briefly, just to illustrate, two cases that we've been conducting in our Ministry of Rural Credit. I'm going to leave it so we'll have opportunity to show it later. This is a solution that is more advanced. We have over 500 actors in municipalities that will facilitate this flow journey of people that are going to seek some kind of credit and need to prove their rural regular status. This goal of this project is to facilitate access to credit by landowners or rural growers, making access to credit easier and more accessible. This is a DataPrev solution that makes up this digital public infrastructure of credentials that is made up here and works in a specific app of my rural property, and financial agents can actually check and receive the documents that are chosen and submitted by those responsible. The digital ECA, actually, those statutes for children and adolescents, we have a clearer text of the new law that was passed last year and the decree that addresses the need to have the verification of the rural environmental registration and seeking alternative solutions to other market solutions that we have. Main goal that very transforming of working with children and adolescent protection in the environment, but as it's been mentioned, protecting data and also providing only necessary information, sharing minimum possible or even no data at all, only attribute whether the person is above 18 or not. We have this development. This is not ready yet of issuing it, counting on the infrastructure of gov.br, the app, and being it's simple and with the simplest flow as possible. I'm going to wrap up and reinstate this idea that we have been rebuilding things based on the digital public infrastructure we've been working with all the institutional capability we have in the country, but looking into the evolution, development, looking at specific segments, working with some pilot projects in some areas, and we're going to start working, trying to consolidate, execute certain cases that are being consolidated in a more structured way for gradual implementation so that we have more maturity and understand how this national trust layer that is interoperable, how it can be organized and function in our country. Well, we have this long-term view that we can indeed transform the digital infrastructures that we already have in great enablers of trust, not only towards the government, but to society as a whole. Thank you, and sorry for taking so long.
Thank you, Luana. We see that this type of debate is going on in several countries in the world. So we are so happy to see how Brazil has had the ability to develop innovative solutions and at the same time to integrate these solutions with legacy solutions that have been developed over the last years. Claudio and myself are Brazilians in the team, and we are so proud not just to be Brazilian, but also to see Brazil's potential in building this relationship and see how things are developing so well. So everything is working very well at the government level and also in the multi-government, subnational governments. And this relates to how easy it is to navigate through those systems, which is allowed by solutions such as verifiable credentials and also the possibility of being part of a framework that allows public services to be used and navigating through different platforms using the same ID. We have just a couple of minutes, and I would like to ask you to make some final remarks. I think we should move away from the script just for our final remarks and to invite our guests to participate, to engage in the discussions of these next 2 days. I love to see when Luana presents, and as a Brazilian, I'm also very proud of the results we've achieved. I've saved a comment to the end that I told you that I would give you the bolder examples in the end. I'm thinking of cases that are unique, and there are two of them related to verifiable credentials that I like. One of them is to fight deep fakes and content that is related from secondary sources. So credentials can be used when this content is created. So we need to we can determine who certified this ID and who it is can help us fighting fake news. And there is another example in agentic AI. Agents can do a lot of things on your behalf. They can purchase something for you. They can schedule a meeting on your name, under your name. But today we cannot confirm whether that agent has your authorization to do those things. So now we will need to have a credential to ensure that that authorization is legit so that that agent can operate on your behalf. So those are two solutions that are new to the market that have great potential of application. That's very good, Bia. Very interesting examples you have just given. I recently heard about a case, actually I read about it on LinkedIn. So how can we deal with those agents, those AI agents, also from the government perspective? Because people will have AI solutions to support them. And of course, we need to think about governance. I don't know if you've seen, and I think it's a real case, and that was published recently. It was about somebody who scheduled an appointment with the barber online, and he confirmed it through that social media. And when the person got here, said, "No, he's not here. Are you sure?" And then he sent a message saying, "But you're not here, and you scheduled that." And he said, "No, yes, I'm here, and you can come. You can come in." No, it's that the person wasn't actually there, but he enabled an AI agent to answer on their behalf. Actually, the AI was lying on their behalf. And I found this so interesting. Someone who's not very experienced in the use of that AI agent. And that was an interesting example. And I am sure that we are going to have more examples like that. We will need to prove who people are and through more sophisticated solutions. Age verification is also important. There will be a very important impact because it will impact on the web and on digital solutions. So that's another example with great potential. I know that we're almost wrapping up, but there's another important point that we still need to discuss. That relates to the multi-sectorial discussions involving the third sector, involving the private sector. We need to see how the government can help in this communication. Those are important points for us to move forward as maybe challenges for the future. Of course, we want to tap into this great potential that Brazil has in our ecosystem. Thank you. Well, we'd like to wrap up this session, and I would like to thank Beatriz and Luana for their participation once again, and I wish you a very good workshop. Once again, we would like to thank the panelists on behalf of Luciano Chalita, and I'll kind of ask you to pose for the official photo. Once again, thank you for your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's continue. Our next topic is overview of verifiable credentials and W3C standard. To share perspectives and experience on this topic, we would like to invite Wagner Denise as the moderator of this panel. And our speaker will be Pierre-Antoine Chambin, who is a member of the W3C technical strategy team since 2021, focusing on data interoperability. Specialist in semantic web, he participated in several working groups related to linked data and the development of standards such as RDF and JSON-LD. Mr. Denise, you have the floor. I would like to thank you, and I'm going to be very brief in my opening remarks. I would just like to highlight that as determination of the CGI, NIC BR hosts the Brazilian chapter of W3C, and that's true since 2007. Since then, we have promoted and publicized technical standards prepared by the global community related to W3C. And we go beyond. We try to incentivize Brazilians, experts, Brazilian technicians to participate, to join this global community that develops new standards. And one of them is the Verifiable Credential standard. W3C was a pioneering group in addressing this topic. Today, there is a working group that deals specifically with the development of technical standards related to this topic. So we are very pleased. And of course, we shouldn't fail to add to this program a presentation about the W3C Technical Strategy Group, and of course, to make ourselves available to increase the discussion on this topic in the future. I am very glad to have Pierre-Antoine Champin as one of the leaders of the data strategy related to the W3C standard. You have the floor, Mr. Champin.
Um, oh, yeah, so I've been already introduced. I'm a W3C fellow from the French Research Center for Computer Science, and I overview everything related to data on the web, including verifiable credential. Although, to be fair, I'm not the team contact of the verifiable credential itself. That's my colleague, Yvonne Herman, whom I represent here today. But, well, I work on a number of related topics, and I have to keep track on what's happening. Very briefly, W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, is the standard body for web technologies. We publish open standards. By open, we mean that they are available free of charge on the web, as one would expect. And open also means that there is a strong royalty-free patent policy on all of our standards, which means strong guarantees for anyone willing to implement or use them. Part of our process is a strong emphasis on things like internationalization, accessibility, security, privacy. Privacy has been mentioned a number of times today, and I will continue on this. This is all summarized in our motto, making the web work and make it work for everyone. So the Verifiable Credentials Working Group has been active for a number of years. I didn't check exactly when it was created, but that was already a long time ago. This is the current state of the standards that we have published in this space. Actually, most of those standards were published in May 2025, so a little more than a year ago. There's a nice overview of those standards at the URL below. By the way, I will give you the URL of those slides as well. I will share them, so you will have access to them after the fact. But before diving into those standards, the present of W3C verifiable credential, let me set the scene. At this point of the day, you should be familiar with this. It's been already presented, including in Enrique's excellent presentation, so I can be quick on this slide. Two things that I want to emphasize. First, there is no direct arrow between the issuer and the verifier. This means that by default, the standard should not require the verifier to communicate with the issuer when they verify a credential. The credential should be self-sufficient for the purpose of verification, at least for the base case. There are cases where you can't really avoid that. I will come back to this later. This is really important for privacy, okay? If there was a mandatory communication each time the credential is verified, mandatory communication with the issuer, that would mean that the issuer would know every time you use a credential and to whom you have presented it. That's a lot of sensitive information that usually we don't want to entrust issuers with. The second important part is this dual notion. We have talked a lot about the credentials, but the specification also defines a verifiable presentation. What is this? In the physical world, when you use a credential, you present the credential itself, right? You present your passport, your driver's license, whatever. In the digital world, usually what you present to the verifier is a slightly different digital document. It does contain one or possibly several credentials, has its own metadata, data describing the presentation in addition to the metadata from the credential, and it also has its own proof. Why is that necessary or desirable? First, because in the digital world, the channel on which you communicate your credential, you, the holder, communicates the credential to the verifier may not be a trusted channel. Okay, in the physical world, you just show it to you, you see it, that's it, right? In the digital world, you may have to communicate it over some channel which is not necessarily trusted, and while the proof in the credential ensures that the credential is as the issuer meant it, the proof of the presentation ensures that nobody tampered with the presentation between the holder and the verifier, because that's not necessarily a given. Another importance of the verifiable presentation is to protect the credential from illegitimate further uses. When I present my passport to a customs officer, for example, when arriving in Brasilia, once they have seen it, I take it back. They don't have it anymore, okay? They don't have anything more than the certainty that I am who I said I am and I am allowed to enter the country. When I send you a digital document, you basically get a copy of it. You can keep it forever. And possibly, if you're not trustable, you may try to reuse it on my behalf later on. That's not something that I want. So the verifiable presentation is a specific document which is not exactly the same as the credential and could be designed in a way that prevents this kind of further illegitimate reuse. Finally, and this was also mentioned several times this morning, this is really important for selective disclosure. Sometimes I don't want to present the whole credential to the verifier, but only a subset of that information. So more on this. Selective disclosure is the ability to present or disclose only a subset of the claims from a credential, while, of course, keeping the credential verifiable. I won't go in detail on the motivation for that. Age verification is the typical one, and it has been mentioned a lot. Again, the idea, quickly, is to verify my age, for example, for buying age-restricted product or access some websites. You don't need anything that's the assurance that I am over a certain age. You don't need my name, you don't need my address, you don't even need my exact date of birth, right? Only this particular information. So there are technical challenges to that. As Henrique explained, with a simple digital signature, as long as you modify anything in the signed digital document, the signature breaks, okay? It's all or nothing. So this doesn't work for selective disclosure. Selective disclosure is some form of legitimate tampering of the credential, which has to be distinguished, of course, from illegitimate tampering. I can remove some information that's valid selective disclosure. I cannot change the information that I show to you, of course. That would be illegitimate tampering. So the technical challenges are well understood, and a number of technical mature solution exists today for selective disclosure. But of course, and that was also mentioned this morning, the solution is never entirely technical. There are also a number of social challenges to be overcome. First, adoption. I cannot do selective disclosure if the credential is not ready for that. Again, if it's just digitally signed with a classical digital signature, I can't do selective disclosure. So the issuer has to provision. Sorry, I got some strange feedback. The issuer has to provision credentials that support selective disclosure. The verifiers have also to be reasonable. It's one thing to be able to disclose only a subset of the information, but if the verifier requests more information that they actually need to perform the task, what can I do about it? Which brings me to the third challenge, the end user. The information request from the verifier must be understandable by the issuer. What exactly is the information that I'm requested to disclose? And is that legitimate from that verifier? And what can I do about it if I decide that it is not? Okay, so again, the technical solutions are here, but that's just one part of the solution. I also wanted to mention that privacy-preserving credentials, selective disclosure is just one first step, okay? It's really useful. As I demonstrated, there's a number of challenges, but sometimes it's even not enough. The more general notion is called zero knowledge proof, or ZKP, okay? Selective disclosure is a very well-defined problem. Zero knowledge proof is much more vague, okay? But that's an interesting notion. The idea is that you should not provide any more information than the information that you are trying to prove. If you're trying to prove that you're over 18, you should not disclose anything else about yourself. So as I said, not your name, not your address, not your date of birth. So removing parts of the credential is one way to do that, but only if the credential contains exactly the information that I want to prove. So we've talked a lot about you don't need the exact date of birth, but on my passport, there is no is over 18 field, okay? There's my name, I can remove that if that supports selective disclosure. There's my address, maybe, I can remove that. There's the date of birth, and that's the only thing that talks about my age. So depending on how the credentials were designed, as a matter of fact, proof of age, or proof of being over a certain age, cannot be done in an entirely zero knowledge proof setting, okay? There are other subtle aspects where sometimes undesired information leak happens, even with selective disclosure, that require even more sophisticated cryptography. Those are really an active field of research, okay? And there are solutions out there. Again, zero knowledge proof is a very, very general notion. You can't say my technology supports zero knowledge proof, but you can say it's about this or that kind of zero knowledge proof. Now, back to the standards published by W3C last year. I won't go in details on each of those specifications, that would be very boring, okay? But let's focus on the central one, the one at the top, the Verifiable Credential Data Model, or VCDM for short. This is version 2.0 of the standard. This is not a first shot from the working group, meaning that it's the third version. Yes, there was a 1.1 version also. The 2.0 version, the major version change, should not mislead you. This is not a major breaking change compared to the previous version. As a matter of fact, the data model has been very stable since the first version. It was called 2.0 because this release from last year was really a major release, covering much more ground than the previous releases of the standard. But again, backward compatibility with previous versions of the standard is pretty much assured. So what makes this, the VCDM, the Verifiable Credential Data Model, stand out is this idea that all the information in the credential, metadata, claims, can be decomposed in small bits called statements or triples, because they are made of exactly 3 pieces: a subject, a predicate, and an object. Those are a bit barbaric terms, but the idea is that every statement states that there's a certain relationship between 2 entities. For example, in this diagram, you can see that the credential at the top was issued by a certain entity. Yeah, here. No, that's not convenient. The credential on the right was issued at a certain date. That's the second statement. Then you have that a certain person is an alumni of a certain organization. That's a third statement. That's part of the claims, and so on and so forth. And when you put all those claims together, as you can see, you can represent them graphically. Every statement is an arrow between two nodes representing the entities. And the whole thing is represented as a graph, both visually, but also in terms of data structure. Graphs are a very versatile, very powerful data structure. And those verifiable credentials are serialized in a JSON document, JSON being a very widespread and popular data format, more specifically a JSON LD document. JSON LD is a W3C standard. It's a dialect, so to speak, of JSON, which is specifically designed to represent graphs, while JSON documents natively represent trees. LD, and JSON LD, stands for linked data. Linked data is a very old concept that was developed across multiple W3C standards. It was not invented for verifiable credentials, but it has a number of very interesting properties for verifiable credentials. First of all, as I said, a credential is a set of statements. If I have two credentials about the same subject, or possibly about different subjects, but that's even more interesting if they're about the same subject, then I can just merge those two sets of statements into a bigger set of statements. I have two graphs. They naturally merge into a bigger graph, which provides consolidated information about the subject. So, and that happens quite naturally with graph. It's much more tricky with trees. Conversely, if you have a graph, a set of statements, you can remove some of the statements. You still have a graph, a smaller graph, but still a graph, okay? So this data model lends itself very well to selective disclosure. When you want to remove a selected subset of the information from the credential. I'm not saying that linked data solves all the problems related to selective disclosure, right? But at least it doesn't create additional friction. A third very important advantage of linked data is the possibility to reuse existing vocabularies or schemas or ontology, depending on how you call them. Those schema, ontology, common vocabularies has been developed for years by organizations working in the same sector in order to exchange data interoperably. There's no reason that from the moment we are exchanging verifiable data, those things should go to the bin and could not be reused, okay? All the more than in many cases, those vocabularies were designed with linked data principles in mind, okay? So the fact that we're using JSON LD makes those vocabulary directly reusable. And finally, there are cases where those vocabularies do not exist yet, okay? And linked data makes it makes it easy to create additional vocabulary without the need to have a global centralized agreement beforehand or registering those vocabulary to some central authority. The idea of linked data is to be able to grow organically at the scale of the web, okay? What I call in this slide decentralized extensibility, what some people also call permissionless extensibility. Because again, you can create your own vocabulary. You don't need anybody's permission to do that. And you can share your data and it will point to the vocabulary so that people that didn't know your vocabulary beforehand can discover it and understand your data eventually. Now, all this is very good, but some people consider that they don't necessarily need all these bells and whistles. I have a very simple use case. All the stakeholders know in advance what kind of vocabulary I'm going to use. Why should I bother with linked data? The good news is you don't have to, because JSON LD is first and foremost JSON. If you are in this kind of simple use case, which I frame as if the context in which your credentials are going to be used is known in advance by all the stakeholders, then indeed, maybe you don't need all those mechanisms. Maybe you can stick to using this JSON LD document as a plain JSON, if such a thing exists, which I doubt, but that's for another discussion. So you can ignore the linked data part in the JSON LD document and just treat it as you would treat another JSON document. That works. That's actually why JSON LD was designed for. But I would argue that this is short-sighted. Well, I mean, you can ignore it, but it's good to have it there still. Getting rid of it just because you don't need it now would be short-sighted. Because there will be a time in the future when you will say, okay, those credentials, they work very well. Now, there's a new use case. I would like to be able to reuse them. But that use case may not be in the exact same context as before. Maybe you're bringing in new verifiers that were not part of the original design. And in order to make these things work in a new context after the fact, if that was not planned in the beginning by making it maybe not linked data, but at least linked data ready, will be much more trouble than it is to have this linked data part in the first place, even if this is for ignoring it in the simple use cases. So, again, I'm not going on to develop each of those specifications, but I would like to focus now on the lower part, okay, the box that says securing mechanism, because that's a very important step in this release of the standards. That's how do we represent the proofs of the credentials. And there's a lot of specifications there. Why so many specifications? Some people consider that standards are meant to choose, okay, to make a choice. So now that's the standard, that's what you should use. Except that in the realm of security, you cannot just say, yep, this is the technology. You were using another technology, you have to change overnight, okay? Security is very sensitive. You can't afford to just switch from one technology to another just because the standard says so. So we need to provision for the different technical stacks that different organizations are using. We need to account for the different regulatory spaces in which they are operating, because this involves cryptography, and some governments mandate that you use this or that kind of cryptography depending on the kind of activity that you're going to have. Finally, there's also a number of choices. Do you need selective disclosure or not? Do you need more advanced zero-knowledge proof? Those are also criteria that determine the kind of technical solution that we'll use, because they also come with a cost. Okay, so on this diagram, we see that this box about securing mechanism has two sides. On the right-hand side, you have what we call enveloping proofs. This is a case where the JSON LD document that contains the metadata and the claim will be wrapped inside another format that adds the proof to it. You can think of it as a sealed envelope, okay? You cannot do anything with the content of the envelope before you have checked the seal and broken it in order to open the envelope, okay? And in some situation, that's what you need. In other situation, what you need is what we call embedded proofs. Here, the proofs is computed from the JSON LD document and injected inside the JSON LD document using the same graph structure as the rest of the information. And in some cases, that's also very useful. So for embedded proofs, we are relying on an IETF set of specification, the Internet Engineering Task Force, called Jose Cose. If you've heard about JSON Web Tokens, JWT, that's exactly what this is about. This is available in JSON, a text format. This is available in CBOR, a binary format. This is also available with a variant enabling selective disclosure called SDJWT, SDJWT. If you want to use embedded proofs, we have a generic specification called data integrity, and which is agnostic to cryptographic algorithms. Okay, so this is the general way to do that. Jose Cose is also, well, agnostic in the sense that it allows you to use several cryptographic primitives. They're all described in the IETF specification. That's why we only have one document on the side. On the left-hand side, we do have the generic data integrity specification, and then we have specialization of that with different cryptographic toolboxes, which we call crypto suites, depending again on the technical stacks and the regulatory requirements. For example, if you are operating in a NIST-regulated environment, you would like to use the ECDSA, because that's the one recommended by NIST, the US authority. Also depends whether you want selective disclosure or not. ECDSA and BBS currently support it, but not EDDSA. So again, a lot of choices here because the different organizations that want to deploy those standards have very varied needs and requirements. We talked about privacy. I would like to spend some time, and I'll stop there for the current state of the specification. On the one on the top right, the bit string status list. This one is about managing revocation. Some verifiable credentials, sometimes need to be revoked before they were supposed to expire. And the driver's license is a good example. If I drive badly, my driver's license might be revoked before its expiration date. And of course, that's the credential itself doesn't tell it, okay? Because I don't get a new driver's license when my driver's license is revoked. And if I did, I would not use that one, possibly. So that's one of the cases where the verifier has to contact some authority, maybe the issuer, maybe somebody else, in order not to check the credential itself, okay? They can tell from the proof, okay, this credential is valid, but is it still active or has it been revoked? I need to ask. And that raises privacy issue, as I described earlier. So in order to solve this privacy issue, this standard proposes actually a very simple solution. The revocation status of the credential is just 0 or 1, okay? It's just, it fits on a single bit. And the issuer or the authority managing the revocation maintains a big array of such bits. Each bit describes the revocation status of one particular credential. And each credential gives you two information. This is the array that contains my revocation status, and this is the number of the bit in this array that's about me. This is privacy preserving because when the verifier gets the full array, of course, they only know which bits is of interest to them. All the other bits, they have no idea who they apply to. So we are not breaching the privacy of others by giving the entire information. And from the issuer's point of view, when a verifier gets the array, we don't know which of the bits is of interest to them. So it's not entirely privacy preserving. They know that one of the numerous credentials in this array is being verified by this verifier, but they have no way to know which one it is. So that provides enough plausible deniability to all of the holders concerned by this array. This is what we have right now. As a matter of fact, some of the specifications in the diagram are not completely stable yet, but there's an active working group, as Wagner said, who's working on this, finalizing the two, I believe, specifications in the previous list that were not completely finished, but also has a number of new deliverables on its list. So what I'm going to present now are not yet W3C standards, right? They are expanding the scope of the standard regarding the use cases of verifiable credentials. All the things that I'm going to describe now are already possible, right? They have been experimented with, but now the feedback from early implementers is good enough that we feel that we can standardize how to solve those problems. The first one is VCAM, the Verifiable Credential API for Lifecycle Management. In a nutshell, it describes how technically the different stakeholders, the issuer, the holder, the verifier, the wallet, can interact with each other over web protocols. Okay? And by doing that, we provide a lower layer on top of which existing protocols such as OpenID for VC, OpenID for VP can be technically implemented. The second one, confidence method, provides a way to answer this kind of question. Is this credential legitimate in this particular context? And a compelling instance of that question is, okay, this verifiable credential is valid, the proof is good, But this driver's license is valid, the proof is good, but is it the driver's license of the person behind the wheel? Or are they using somebody else's driver's license? There are other subtle variations on this question, like how did the verifier know that they were issuing a credential to the right person? All this needs to be described in the credential in order, again, the automatic verification of the proof of the digital signature is one aspect of the trust. It was mentioned earlier as other human aspects, but some part of those additional layers of trust can also be automated, and that's what this specification is about. Recognized entities is meant to respond to another question, which is this entity legitimate in performing that action? For example, is this issuer authorized to issue that kind of credential? And conversely, is this verifier authorized to request access to that kind of credential? In simple use cases, maybe we know in advance all the issuers and all the potential issuers and all the potential verifiers, in which case, well, we don't need this additional layer of standardization. But there's a number of cases where that's not possible. Take educational credential. Any school or university in the world is likely to issue credential, and the verifiers cannot know them all in advance, right? So, okay, this is a computer engineering diploma. The signature is valid, the proof is valid, okay, but I don't know this university. Does it even exist? If it exists, does it have a computer engineering curriculum? Maybe I don't know all the universities, but maybe I can know in advance the education departments of various governments, and they can in turn vouch for different universities and so on. So this kind of delegated trust is important in highly decentralized use cases for verifiable credentials. And we need standardized way to communicate this kind of information. Another example, I will come back to this if I have time, but maybe I won't, is global trade. In global trade, the number of issues, so the credentials are about products that are being exchanged across borders, okay? The number of issuers and verifiers is incredibly high. The diversity, and they can't possibly know each other. So they need means to discover whether they can trust this particular issuer or this particular verifier. Verifiable credential rendering methods is a standard to specify how the credential is displayed to a human, because we mentioned already there is always a human layer on top of the automated layer for trust, okay? And in order for this human layer to work, then we need reliable and meaningful ways to render the credential to a person. That also touches on accessibility, because visually rendering credentials is usually the default, but not always appropriate for all kinds of users. So we are also considering auditive rendering for screen readers, haptic rendering for braille readers, and so on. And finally, the last of the deliverables on the charter of the new working group is verifiable credentials barcode. It does exactly what it says on the can, namely, how can you serialize a verifiable credential into one of the different flavors of 2D codes? Like it says barcode, but that's not just the good old barcode that you have in the supermarket, right? It includes QR codes and again, a number of different flavors, like the one you have maybe on your driver's license and stuff like that. And I think that's a really exciting that opens for really exciting use cases. Of course, that's the QR code that displays on your phone for somebody else to scan it. That could be the QR code that's on a plastic card or on a manufactured product, the product carrying with it its identity and the credential about it. That's very important in the domain of supply chain or global trade. But it was mentioned earlier also that connectivity cannot be assumed to be always available. Even having a smartphone is not something that can be assumed in every part of the world. So those encoding digital credentials in physical barcodes is a really important feature for a number of use cases, including in emerging countries. I want to save time for some questions, so I have some examples of real-world deployments of credentials. But as I said, you will have access to the slides anyway, and I can use those in answering the questions if that's necessary. Thank you.
Pierre, muito obrigado pela sua apresentação, muito
Very
interessante,
much, Pierre, for your
esclarecedora.
presentation. It was very interesting, very clarifying about the work done by W3C working group. So thank you very much for your work and your presentation. And he saved 5 minutes in the time he had for his presentation. So we have time for one question, not more than one. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand so that we can take the microphone to you. Please ask the question in Portuguese, so that is going to be easier for everyone and he can hear the interpretation. Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. Congratulations. So, considering safety, security, and privacy, what are the protection mechanisms used to reduce the risk of the AI model connected to the internet, especially when data privacy is threatened or in cases of attacks or non-authorized access or prompt access? And there is a second question. I'd like to add the second question and then we'll answer both of them. Good morning and congratulations on your presentation. It was really good. So in addition to the technical aspects of standardization of verifiable credentials, I would like to hear your opinion about the need of governance so that reliability aspects related to human relationship is also ensured, not just the technical aspects, to ensure the data that is verified. Are you working with Linux in terms of trusted IP initiative or any working group on governance that will work with Linux or something along those lines? Thank you. Pierre?
That's a tricky question. There's a number of issues. There's a number of efforts around this, like extending the robots.txt that limits the access of information on the web. I'm not sure how credentials can help with that. Credentials is not about restricting access. It's more about restricting use or illegitimate use, right? So maybe I'm missing some points in your question. I'm happy to talk about this later on. But my short answer would be, this is rather orthogonal to verifiable credentials. As for governance, so I did talk about the fact that technical solutions alone are never sufficient. We do have collaboration with a number of other organizations. We have a number of liaison with other standard bodies and other organizations. As for I guess you were talking about the Linux Foundation. There's the Open Wallet Foundation, I think, which is a Linux Foundation project with whom we have a lot of interaction. They have coordinated the organization of the Global Digital Collaboration Conference in Geneva last July, I think, right? And the next one is in September, still in Geneva. W3C is a co-organizer of this conference. And this is a great forum to talk about all the dimensions of verifiable credentials, ecosystems, not just the technical one. I did focus on, I mean, our working group, we are a technical standard organization. So that's indeed our focus. But the fact also that, as I said, we are very wary of dimensions such as security, accessibility, so meta-technical aspects of it. And governance is definitely also an important point. We try to bring our contribution to that as well.
Ok, muito obrigado, Pierre, pela
Thank you
sua
very much, Pierre, for your
apresentação.
presentation. Thank you for your participation.
Então, agora,
Thank you. And also like to thank the audience for their attendance. And now
salva de
I'll
palmas para Pierre Antoine.
turn back to our Master of Ceremonies. So a round of applause to Pierre. Thank you, Wagner Diniz. Once again, we'd like to thank the panelists, and I'd like to ask people to pose for the official photo. Well, in the meantime, you'll see on the screen QR codes for the location of restaurants nearby so that you can have lunch, especially our foreign guests. And we will have a 1 hour break. We will return at 1:30. We appreciate for your understanding. Thank you.